We are live. Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of Vitality. We're going to be diving in here today to talk about largest contentful paint, or however you say that. That's the first gripe I'm going to have. In fact, before we even get started, how are we going to come up with a word like contentful? Is it contentful, contentful? How are we supposed to be saying this, Brian?
Largest contentful paint. But yeah, like I never actually say the full word. I say LCP. That's what I always say.
I'm going to say that for the rest of this webinar, so I don't have to try to pronounce it. And my autocorrect, like the spelling thing, always goes off anytime I have to write this. And it just reminds me that this is not a word we're talking about here. Good to see everybody here today. We got lots of people here waiting already, so I'm excited about that. I'm going to give it just a minute for notifications to go out, but Brian informed me we have a lot to cover today, so I'm not going to dilly-dally.
I'm going to adjust my monitor here while we're waiting.
Yeah, you're good. I will shamelessly plug here. Last time I checked, let me recheck here. 49 subscribers away from 10,000. So if anybody here is watching and haven't subscribed to the channel, there is a possibility we could hit 10,000 subscribers during this stream, which would that would give me a good Friday. I think I'd be pretty happy about that. So consider
everyone subscribing.
There you go.
I watch all of your generate blocks, generate press tutorials. Like I love those. I always learn something. Because I'm never that deep into those products. Like you go all the way down the rabbit hole.
Yes.
And so I always learn something.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'll try to flash this on and off the screen here. I don't want to cover up the screen too much. But if you use the coupon code, the admin bar, if on the Perfmatters plans, it works on any of the plans, you save 20%. So don't go there and purchase it without saving a little bit of money, right? So just use that coupon code and you're good to go. Brian is going to be sharing some slides today. He's going to be jumping back and forth into some demo kind of stuff. After the call is over today and we wrap everything up, I'll be giving everybody a copy of those slides. So check back on it tomorrow or something, and I'll have a link inside this video description, and I'll probably post it on our website. There'll be a link to that. So if there's anything in here that you wanted to make sure to grab, give us a day and we'll have all that to you. So yeah, hit like on here, hit subscribe if you haven't subscribed to the channel, and I'm going to shut up with all that, and I'm just going to let Brian take it over. Like I said, today we're talking about LCP and seeing how we can get our websites off to a good start here. So let's go ahead and do it, man.
All right. Yeah, and if anyone wonders, I have a second monitor. I haven't figured out a better way to do that. So if you notice me glancing, it's just because I want to make sure I'm showing the right stuff.
Well, I'm going to make us a little bit smaller here and share your screen, so I don't think anybody will be bothered.
So, okay, yeah, so let's just start off here with the definition, which I think is confusing for a lot of people. So LCP, largest contentful paint, is a metric that gauges how fast the main content or the largest of a web page loads and becomes visible to the user in the viewport. So I put a little tip down there. We'll be going over FCP later, but just not to confuse it, FCP renders how the first element on the page, whereas LCP is the largest element to load.
And so it's the largest that's within the viewport, right? Not
within the viewport, yeah.
Okay.
So above the fold, largest element. And sometimes, Google will be a little nitpicky. If you have two like similarly large elements, like it's going to pick one of those as to what is going to take the longest to load. But yeah, FCP is all about first one. LCP is about largest one above the fold. So, and we'll go through FCP later in the video. Common things are a featured image in a blog post, background hero image like an Elementor, but it can also be text or video too, like a header. If you have a big header using large text, that's another common LCP element. So those are the three main things that I typically see on sites. It is an official Core Web Vitals metric. So again, in our first video on TTFB, we went over this. Some people think all those measurements in PageSpeed Insights are Core Web Vitals. They are not. Only LCP, INP, and CLS are the ones that you are passing or failing on. So just always remember important to keep that in mind. The other ones are just notable metrics which impact them. So they're important, but it's not what you're passing or failing on.
Brian, there's a little notice on your screen from StreamYard saying you're sharing your screen. You might hit and hide on that because I know it's just covering up part of the screen there.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
So yeah, keeping that in mind, LCP, official Core Web Vitals metric. Why is it important? because obviously it's it's probably the largest thing on the screen. You want it to load as fast as possible. So that's going to impact, how fast the site feels, how user experience, engagement, everything like that. And that's why Google wants it to load as quickly as possible. Next here. So what is a good LCP? So according to Google, they want you to be under 2.5 seconds. And they use the 75th percentile measurement. And basically that just means 75% of the visits or crawls to your site need to be in that good under 2.5 second threshold to get that classification and say that you're good. Otherwise, anything over that, you're going to get the, in the orange needing improvement or poor, which at that point you're failing LCP at that point. They're using a throttled 4G connection. So that's important to remember too, just because if you're testing things, on desktop, it might seem fast, but you're really wanting to optimize for a slow cell phone connection at this point. And everything like indexing in Google, like all this stuff's happening at mobile. So like you always want to optimize for the slowest mobile device possible, basically.
Yeah, and I think we often think of like we're loading you might even pull out your phone and load it on your own device, but you're probably connected to your Wi-Fi at your house.
Exactly.
You're using a very modern device and all that. And I think what Google's trying to do is like emulate the average person. We have to remember not everybody's on blazing fast internet everywhere. So,
yep. Yeah. So it does make sense why they're doing that. They want it to get good across the board. How to measure LCP. So a bunch of different tools you can use. A few of my favorites, obviously PageSpeed Insights. I like to use GTmetrix a lot too. And then Debug Bear is another one of my favorites I use recently. I love their labels. I wish like other tools like GTmetrix, if you're watching anyone from there, you should have these. But I love how they add the labels for stuff like preloads and LCP. So with Google, you can see in the second slide there, like they'll sometimes capture the LCP, but like you don't know if it's like, is this the header or a div or the image itself? Sometimes it's just confusing. And so I really like Debug Bear because you can see like, okay, the LCP is literally this image file. And so it's just a lot easier to double check. So I'm using that constantly throughout the day. And again, I always recommend speed testing, 3 to 4 times, just because there's other things that can impact your testing like cache, latency, distance, all that stuff. So never just rely once if you're taking LCP measurements. And I'm going to drag over this here. Next window. Actually, we'll go over this here first. So when we're looking at the test in PageSpeed Insights, obviously we'll see this LCP here at the top left. And that's taking the data over the last 30 days crawling, and that's what's you're gonna pass for core web vitals. This is basically gathering up all the data from everyone hitting your site and Google crawling it and all this stuff. So let me give you a better example here. So we're gonna drag this over, and actually I need one with some more data. So this is just eBay, so like don't really pay attention to the scores here, but it's important to know that like all this top data here, this is that 28, 38 day longer real user data that you're passing or failing on. The data down below here, looks like eBay needs to do some work here. This is the lab data. And so like this is the immediate data if I'm testing it right now. So if I'm running tests over and over, like I'm really optimizing based on this data, but I want it to eventually all impact into my real user scores up here at the top, because that's what I'm passing or failing on. And see here, you can see that there's this little tab here. So a lot of people sometimes miss this here too. And it depends on how much traffic you get if this will actually have data. But there's this URL or origin. So origin will be the data across your whole site. Mm-hmm. And then this URL is the specific URL. So make sure you're not confused and you're checking that, because sometimes people will think like, why is this URL failing? When really it's stuck on the origin because they don't have enough data for that URL. And it's the whole site. And it could be, a whole set of other URLs causing problems. instead of that individual URL.
Yeah, that's a little bit hidden. They should make that a little bit.
Yeah, very small and tiny. So I point that out a lot of times in tickets because people are like looking at the data thinking it's that URL and it's not sometimes. So yeah, that's important to understand. Okay, so now we're going to dive into tips, and how I kind of structure this is all the warnings and page speed insights that you see that impact LCP. So let me actually drag this back here for a second. See this tab here, or filter, I guess you could say. This is everything that's impacting LCP. So the rest of the presentation, we're kind of going to be walking through each of these things and what you can do to fix these. So first is server response time. And this is one of the most important metrics. I can't stress this enough, that cache in your server matters for LCP. You need a high quality hosting provider because they're going to be using more powerful servers, have better networking connections, broadly compression, better DNS providers, all this stuff. You want to have a cache solution in place. And in our previous presentation, in case you missed it, we went over all of this. The whole thing is on TTFB and server response time. So if you want to optimize this part, I would go watch the previous presentation on Kyle's YouTube channel. And just a few metrics or data points is, so when we enable cache on a server in the same geographical location, just doing that alone, LCP decreased by, on average, like 20%. It gives you an idea of just enabling cache does that much. Now, if you move, like, let's say your server's in United States, but you're over in Germany, if you don't have edge cache enabled, the LCP is going to increase by 140%, which is not good. So like the person in Germany, they're going to see LCP is going to be worse, way, way worse than over in the United States, just because of that distance. And so the way you fix that is with edge cache with something like Cloudflare.
That's the difference between passing and failing, I would imagine, for a lot of people.
It can be. And it does matter, like, are you serving global clients? Maybe you're only serving, local people in Dallas, Texas or something. If that's the case, that doesn't really matter because all your traffic's coming from probably around Dallas. But if you have a lot of clients from, say, Germany, that's going to be a problem. So it does matter where your clients are. You can look in like Google Analytics or something to figure out where the bulk of your traffic is actually coming from. But if you are serving global clients, you're going to want to have edge cache enabled these days. And again, we go over that in the previous presentation, how to enable edge cache, some plugins you can use, stuff like that. But important to keep cache and server response time in mind. Next is these warnings to Minify CSS and Minify JavaScript. So one thing I will say is that most developers minify things beforehand these days. However, we're still seeing so many stragglers. I was personally hoping this would drop off, to be honest, and we could get past this. Kind of like the combining files. You're not really supposed to be doing that anymore. I was hoping this would be in that ballpark, but like there's just so many developers not doing this. And Cloudflare just recently announced that they're going to be they're deprecating minification. So because of that, we decided to add this in our Perfmatters plugin. And also from here on out in the presentation, we're going to be diving into our Perfmatters plugin a lot. So we'll be bouncing back and forth between that. So minification basically just means that you want to remove any unnecessary characters like white space, comments, variable names, stuff like that. If you look at the source code for like a JS file, if it's like really long and there's these blank spaces, that's kind of what minification is removing.
Yeah, basically, if it's human readable, it hasn't been minified.
If it's scrunched all up, and you can't read it, basically that's minified. And so we just recently added this to our Perfmatters plugin, also because Cloudflare is getting rid of it, unfortunately.
I know on some of the things we've talked about, that's like, okay, lots of things can do minification, right? There's redundant settings in Perfmatters and some other plugins. And I know some of the advice you've given before is like, you don't want to do something twice. Like, don't install 2 caching plugins and turn them on, right? Do we run a risk here too if we're not sure what things have been minified and what haven't? Is turning minification on too many places actual harmful, or?
We've actually tested that, and it doesn't actually break anything that we found, but it's actually not going to help you either. And like, you never want to have more features on that are trying to do the same thing, because technically there are more queries happening in the background to see, like, is this on? Has this been minified? Stuff like that is happening in the background.
Sure.
And you don't want to have multiple plugins running logic like that. So yes, if you have minification running in something else and you wanted to use it in Perfmatters, I would switch it off in that other thing first, and then put it on in ours, or vice versa. Like, everything in our plugins modular, so like you can use what you want and use what you don't want. Maybe you like another popular one, people have been using this auto optimize for years, or I always say auto optimize, but it's automize. I never pronounce it right, but
that's worse than Contentful.
Yeah, but again, lots of people have been using that for years, and so maybe you're already doing that there and you're completely fine with that. So yeah, wherever you want to do it, it is good to have minification on, especially on the larger sites where you probably have a few stragglers. If you're running literally a stripped down version of Generate Press with Generate Blocks, you probably don't even need to enable minification. But yeah, it's always safe to turn on too. So, and again, this is most things don't break with this anymore. We use an open source library that's been tried and tested by millions of sites over the years. So
excellent.
And let me pop into this here. So if we're doing this in Perfmatters, we just have these 2 tabs here. We just separated this recently because we're running into too many options here. So we have this JavaScript. We have a Minify. Is that in here? And it's just easy toggle on. We have exclusions if you need it. But again, I don't even think I've added a single exclusion since we've added this feature yet on tickets. So it's just very rare. And then we have a way to clear it if you need to. Same with CSS. We have a Minify, toggle on, exclusions if needed. And then we have filters if you need to like run minification on, on a certain page, or like if you're a developer, you can, fine tune things a lot more. Okay. And minification, basically that'll just squeeze out. It'll make the file size just slightly smaller. That's the end goal. That's why Google wants you to do it. Next is reduce unused CSS. So a lot of plugins and themes, they'll load their style sheets everywhere across the site. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing this to hurt your performance. Sometimes things like short codes and things don't have a way, like WordPress doesn't have a way to detect if a short code is actually there. And so that's one reason why developers have to load things sometimes, because they're assuming that a short code might be there at some point. It's very crazy to think you can't detect a short code, but that is how it works. Now we are with blocks, things are becoming better. We're kind of moving away from short codes. So like, I'm hoping this gets better over time. Developers can like at least start detecting things more of what's running and not load things. But lots of people have short codes everywhere still. And so many developers just load things everywhere. So you have a lot of unused CSS. And so Google wants you to clean that up, obviously, because of the file sizes. And so we have this feature in our Perfmatters plugin. We'll bounce over to this. Remove unused CSS. And we do have a couple options here. So we have default is inline. People like to use inline because it kind of fixes more page speed scores. Okay. But this can sometimes, when you just inline everything, it can also impact LCP. Because if you think about it, if you go back to server response time and TTFB, that's the server response time is impacted by how big your HTML doc is. So let's say your document size is like 75 kilobytes, but you then inline all your CSS. Your document size is now, let's say, 140 kilobytes if you have a lot of CSS. So that 140 kilobyte HTML document web page, it's going to take longer to load. Your server response time is going to go up. TTFB is then higher, which then impacts your LCP because it got to download. Let's just go into the slang there. It has to download that full document before it can even start processing the LCP element, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Like that's happening beforehand. So I always encourage folks to be careful to not just inline everything like SVG code, CSS. Like you want to test before and after. If you have a streamlined site, you know, with generate press and generate blocks and stuff, like just inlining everything is probably completely fine. So it depends on what you're running. And I always recommend testing both scenarios, but that's why we also have this file version. Because if you run the file version, it's going to cache the CSS separately in a file, and that's not necessarily going to always impact the LCP element itself. So the file version can actually have a better performance impact on your LCP. So just keep that in mind. And again, you might want to test both because inline might work better for both metrics, for server response time and LCP, but it really depends on how much code you have running. So, but yeah, test those before and after, see which works better for your individual site. But that's why we have both options. And style sheet behavior, I recommend keeping this on delay. Please do not use remove unless you're a developer. We've almost ended up removing this because this is remove. Basically, you're going to need to add some exclusions to make that work on the site. And so we recommend using delay, meaning our feature will clean up any unused CSS, and it will then load the additional style sheets on user interaction to ensure anything, you know, like below the fold, anything loads after the fact. Async is also good, but it's not going to give you the performance impact of delay. So I always recommend using delay. That's what we use on our sites. And yeah. And we're not going to go into exclusions here because that would that's a whole nother presentation type of thing. But you can add exclusions if you need it. Select your exclusions and then clear the used CSS. If you have any problems with these, like something like impacting the visual part of your site, you know, always reach out to us. We're always happy to help. And we try to respond as fast as possible. So in our testing, this is just from, I took this over like polling client sites over a period of time. I saw an average decrease in LCP of 19 or almost 20% just by enabling remove unused CSS. So just one feature, 20% increase.
And do you see, I feel like I've ran into more trouble with that toggle than I have some other things. Like, do you see that causing issues more often than not?
I would actually say
other things.
I would say CSS, removing unused CSS, and this doesn't go just for our plugin, but also for any other plugin that's doing the same, sure. Removing unused CSS. It is one of the most powerful features, but it is also one that can be the most prone to break things visually on the front end, unfortunately. And it's just, you know, with hundreds and thousands of different themes and plugins running code in different ways, like sometimes you might need to exclude a style sheet. That's just how it goes.
Right.
And to make things work. And so, again, we're always happy to help if you run into any visual issues. And I forgot to put that in this slide, but I'll add this after it. And I'll make sure these in the slide. We have a query string you can use. We have a doc with this on our site, like Perfmatters CSS off. You can add on your URL to see, like, is it just this feature from Perfmatters breaking the visual part of my site? And you can easily test that without having to mess with any settings in Perfmatters. Again, I'll put those in the slides, and we'll make sure that's in here before I hand it off to Kyle.
I literally used that today. Somebody said, my form's not working anymore. I don't know what to do. And I just opened it up in an incognito tab. It wasn't working. It's like one of those embedded third-party forms. And then the next thing I did was turn Perfmatters off, and I figured out exactly what it was, fixed it in 2 seconds. I'm like, God, I love that. So I don't have to, because before I was disable the plugin, then go try it, you know, disable the plugin, clear the cache, all that. Now it's just that little query for turning Perfmatters off is great.
And we also have individual exclusions at the post page level too. If people don't realize that, there's little checkboxes if you go into the editor, and you can just like say, I want to just, maybe it's a contact page. I actually turn off optimizations on our contact pages just because for us, that's our ticketing system. I don't want the contact form pushing out a bad update and then our optimizations, you know, maybe impacting that. Like, that's our most important page on our site is our contact page. So I just uncheck delay.js, unused CSS, stuff like that. I just don't want them running there. My contact page is not that important for core web vitals.
Sure.
The rest of my site is. So I just say, like, hey, don't run those there. And so you can do that too. Like maybe you have a contact page where that's super important for leads. Like maybe you just want to turn off optimizations. People should have most of the files for that page in cache probably by the time they get there anyways. So next is delay.js. So this is very similar to unused CSS. Developers load JS everywhere. Google complains because they see a lot of unused code. They want the files smaller. So delaying JS on user interaction, where technically it shouldn't be loaded anyways, is a great way to fix that problem. And by loading on user interaction, we mean like scrolling, moving the mouse, clicking on the phone, anything will trigger the rest of the scripts to load. And if we go into Perfmatters here, so if we enable delay.js here, I have just a few things installed on this dev site just to show you. There's two options, delay all and delay specified scripts. I actually recommend using the delay all these days. We don't have that on the default because it is pretty powerful too. So, but delay all is a great way to start. And we have these quick exclusions. So like, let's say you enable delay all and you realize, wait, something on my front end's broken. We keep improving this here where you can say, oh, I'm running Elementor, so let me check this Elementor checkbox, and that'll most likely fix any JS issues you've been having with Elementor. Or like maybe I have a generate press masonry menu from the side or something like that.
And to make sure I understand that correctly, these quick exclusions are like essentially integrations. You guys have figured out, hey, when we do this delay all scripts, these plugins might have problems with it, and you've just built in exclusions where we don't have to write an exclusion. We just check a box, and you're auto-suggesting only the ones that we have installed, basically.
Correct. So if I was to go like, I don't remember what the directory is, but like, so let's say if I was just going to try to exclude Elementor together,
right, just
manually here with their whole folder, whatever it is, that's kind of what this checkbox is doing. Gotcha. Just saving you some steps, and because of how different things code with dependencies and inline JS, it can be sometimes hard to track them down. And so we don't want people to, people aren't developers. And so we try to keep adding all the popular solutions in there. And if there's something in there you want to see that you're using all the time that we don't have in there, like please, like, we have a feature request checkbox on our contact form, like send it over to us. If we see it a lot too, like we'll add it. Sometimes we do this just based on volume that we see. So
yep. And if you're a plugin developer, which I know we have several of those in our group, I mean, or if you work with plugin all the time and you're running into issues, connect Brian with them. I connected Brian with the folks with the WP Forums crew and or the WS Forums crew. Mark got him all set up, so they were able to work out all those things and helped me out. So I think
same
both
with
the plugin developer and Brian's going to be happy to do that. So
yeah. Same with Termageddon. I think you were the one that maybe passed me to Hans at some point. Yeah. So we did something with Termageddon and user-centrics too there. And again, those will only show up if you have it installed. But then we do have some advanced options here. I probably won't go over that in these. Feel free to click into our docs here from these tooltips and read more about those, or send us a message if you have questions about it. For this, the most important thing here is just delaying the JS, getting rid of that unused code to help fix what's impacting LCP. And again, we have filters too for this, so you can do all sorts of stuff with our delay.js. Next is render blocking resources. This is probably the most common warning that people see all the time that has been around forever. The good thing is the removing unused CSS and delaying the JS that's not needed right away, those will both fix render blocking warnings. That's why I went over those first, is because that will naturally help fix these. And then I also have a note here that's saying, if you're running something like Elementor with some more dynamic moving parts, you're probably having to load jQuery. And like that will have to just be excluded and you can't delay it. And like, there's no way to optimize jQuery at this moment. Like no one has come up with a great way to optimize jQuery. And unfortunately it's a big library. So For right now, I recommend, doing the best you can around jQuery if it's loading, and just ignoring that kind of for now. You can defer jQuery, but again, it depends on what you have running. I recommend just not usually touching jQuery on both sides. And that's just where we are with the state of WordPress. I hope that we can get to a smaller library for that eventually, but we'll see.
It feels like most people aren't introducing new things with jQuery at this point, right? Or are people still doing that?
I haven't seen, there's still change logs consistently for jQuery improvements. It's still it's one of the most popular libraries across the web outside of WordPress. But, the main reason it was developed from the get-go was developers can hook into jQuery to save on development time. That was the whole goal. But these days now it has turned into, it doesn't always save time because it's literally the biggest file left on the site that you can't really optimize. So that it's turning into actually a bigger problem these days, in my opinion. A lot of times it's better you can do things quicker with just vanilla JS instead of relying on this bigger library for the stuff. Second way to fix render blocking resources is to defer JavaScript. And so let's say you have your Elementor scripts and you have that let's say you're delaying JS. You have the quick exclusion enabled for Elementor, so those Elementor scripts themselves aren't delayed, but you can defer them. And so we go back into Perfmatters here. You can enable defer. And so how our things work together in tandem is basically anything that's not delayed, when defer is on, it will then defer whatever's left, essentially. And defer essentially means the JS is downloaded during the HTML parsing and it's executed after the page is finished loading. So I like to think of it as moving to the bottom of the waterfall, even though that's not physically what's happening. That's in my brain. You think of it like it's loading last type of a thing. That's kind of essentially what's happening. So you can enable defer, and again, you can use it along with delay.js. I recommend using both. I use both on all of our sites. It's rare to run into issues with defer, but if you do, let's say you have a large complex site with a lot of JS and you have a lot of inline JS, if you run into any issues, we recommend toggling on inline scripts, because this will basically defer all the individual JS and all the inline JS as well. And that order is what breaks and what causes problems with JS because of dependencies. So this keeps that same order, essentially deferring everything.
Gotcha. I don't think I've ever run into issues with the defer. Sometimes with the delay, when I'll turn that on, it's like something's not styled quite correctly when it first loads, and then as soon as I move my mouse, it jumps or something, right? So sometimes you'll see that. Now, most of the time, moving your mouse or interacting almost instantly, anyways. But that's usually when I'll notice that had something to do with the delay. On my sites, I put a wrapper around everything to kind of contain the width, and that was having trouble with the delay script. That was not snapping it, or it was snapping into place once I moved my mouse. So that was one of the exclusions I added, was just exclude this class from that delay, and then it was fine after that.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, one example we saw recently was Fluent Forms plus Cloudflare turnstile integration plus this dynamic uploader thing. All three of those in combination turned out they were having an issue with defer. And again, it's these more complex situations that sometimes cause these issues. And so we ended up having to add a turnstile exclusion for deferral as well as delay. So it can definitely happen, but like you said, it's very rare. And we do have an option to include jQuery and defer, but again, I usually don't recommend doing it. You can try it and see if anything happens. It's easy to toggle back off. I don't recommend usually using this for most people's sites. And then you can add exclusions. And again, we have filters for all this stuff. We work with so many developers and developers at agencies that are fine-tuning things beyond what most people want to even see. And so filters can really help you programmatically do things behind the scenes without needing toggles even sometimes.
Sure.
Next is the ensure text remains visible during web font load. I know a lot of people see this and it's kind of confusing. Hopefully explain this as easily as possible. So basically modern browsers wait until the font has fully loaded to display it. That's just how it works. Sometimes this creates a flash, otherwise known as FOIT, flash of invisible text is what that stands for. And this can sometimes hold up the LCP while that process is happening. So Google wants you to really fix this issue. And there's a couple things you can do, and this can all be done in Perfmatters. And there's a lot of ways you can approach this. Different plugins, themes, and page builders sometimes have some of this stuff now too. First would be I recommend, this is like a 4-step process here sometimes, but first is I always recommend hosting your fonts locally for faster performance. So if you have Google fonts, get them local, whether you're uploading them custom, like Elementor has this custom fonts thing, you can just upload them to your site. That's fine too. Just get them local on your site instead of loading them from an external resource. And so if we go back to Matters here, fonts, we have this local Google fonts. So if you're running Google fonts, this will basically just copy them and move them locally. We don't change anything about what your theme or page builder is doing. We just literally take what it's doing and then replace that and basically say, load these instead. And I think I saw Generate Press or Generate Blocks is adding a local Google fonts feature, just like WordPress core. I'm actually really excited about that because you'll be able to do this now in Generate Press or Generate Blocks.
It's in the alpha versions right now, but it'll be in the next.
Okay. Yeah. So I am looking forward to that. If everything in Page Builder had this, we could get rid of this feature altogether in our plugin.
I will say this is still so much easier because it's literally like, boop, turn the toggle and then you're done.
Yeah. Yeah. It depends on what you're doing. Yeah. And how many fonts you have and stuff. So next is after you have your fonts local, that's the first step. You should add swap to your fonts. So this is what's actually fixing that warning. And it's basically saying fall back temporarily to system fonts at the OS level temporarily. Even if you don't see it, it's like, fall back to, I forget what the Mac font is, San Francisco font or whatever it is. Fall back to that temporarily while the switch is happening and then go to your fonts. And so you can enable the swap here, and that's what that does. Then third is you should preload your fonts. Now this is kind of counterintuitive because we just added swaps. So it would be like, well, for falling back, why are we adding preload? Because that's forcing it to load right away. But again, these are just the settings I have found work the best with what Google is telling us and performance-wise. And preloading your fonts here to minimize any CLS. So let me pull up an example here.
I've certainly found the same thing on my end. I'm sure this was you getting me into doing it, but in my Perfmatters settings, I'll always go in there and find whatever the link is to all the fonts they're loading, and then I'll go into that preload screen, which is I'm sure what you're about to show us here in a few, and preload all the fonts.
Yeah, so this is kind of just our doc here, but I have it, and you can go look at this later too if you need a reminder. But basically, I just recommend if you're not used to Chrome Dev Tools, like using that tool in your browser, I just recommend using a free page speed tool like Debugbear or GTmetrix. And after you've enabled local fonts, you can then just, click into fonts, see what the local fonts that we're now loading are. You can grab those URLs from the waterfall, and then you can put them back into Perfmatters. So we go to preload here. We put that font URL right here. We'd go to font here. We will check cross origin. This is used for fonts. And that's it. And then we would add, we'd add another one. We'd add, say you have 4 local fonts, and then we'd go through the process of adding all those URLs.
Essentially, what that's doing is just making sure those load sooner in the process.
Sooner to minimize any CLS is basically, which is shifting on the page, which is also a metric that we'll go over in another presentation. But it is kind of counterintuitive because you're adding swap and then you're preloading. So it's like, why would you need to do both? But I found it's just best to do both of those. So those are the steps that I always usually recommend. And fourth, we have a async Google Font CSS. So like we load a tiny bit of CLS or CSS along with the local fonts. And so you can go and load that asynchronously, so it's not render blocking anymore. And again, I would test with that on or off because sometimes that can impact CLS. You have to be really tricky with fonts. You don't want to hold up anything usually with fonts because it can impact the CLS. So, with the async thing, test on and off in PageSpeed Insights, see if it changes that CLS metric at all.
And if you're using Perfmatters, I know some people might be following along here. I'm following along, clicking a few things on my end. I think that load asynchronously only shows up when you're in the advanced option. So if you're not seeing that in your copy of Perfmatters, go into the Tools tab, and then you can turn on Show Advanced Options, hit Save, and then when you go back into the font section, you'll see that option there.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I'll try to get that into the slides here too. Then, okay. Avoid chaining critical requests. So basically, this is just straight from Google, but the greater the length of the chains and the larger the download sizes, the more significant impact on page load performance. Basically, you don't really need to understand what the chains are themselves. You just want to get this number down as low as possible. So here we can see on this bigger site I was using in the test, we can see there's 77 chains. This is before like doing anything in Perfmatters. So like if you enable, unused CSS, delay JS, defer JS, preloading local fonts, every single one of those will actually get rid of a critical request. And so by the time you've done all of that, hopefully your critical requests are actually quite low. But it's always good to check here to see what's still loading here and think through like, why is that still? Here's like, maybe I should have delayed this. We'll go into our script manager here a little later. Like maybe it's something I should get rid of or disable. Like it's always good to like just see what is left loading there. But again, most sites, I see most people don't need to worry about that if they're doing all of this other stuff already. So. Next is avoid enormous network payloads. So this is basically just saying, giving you a warning, any large resource on your site, you need to make it smaller, basically. And it's going to sort from top to bottom, like these are your biggest things, fix these.
Avoid anything enormous when it comes to websites.
Yeah.
Prices.
And remember, we're talking about slow throttle 4G phones. So like it makes sense why they're throwing errors for bigger things like this. JS, CSS, images, fonts, etc. All this can impact your LCP depending on where it is in the load order and stuff like that. And another important thing here, and I don't know when PageSpeed Insights changed this, but let me pull an example here from this eBay one. I think this happened within the last month or two, but PageSpeed Insights is now showing uncompressed sizes for like JS and CSS here. They're not showing the compressed sizes. So like most sites these days always have gzip running, like servers. Like if you have Cloudflare running, you just have Broadly running in the background, compressing your files. Like you might not even know what this is, and it's probably already running. Most hosting providers just have this done for you, or the caching plugin. However, PageSpeed Insights recently changed this where they're now just showing uncompressed sizes for everything, which is a little annoying, but it's also helpful, I guess, and as well, because it's showing you this file here, like loading. This is on eBay, but I guarantee you this JS file isn't 280 kilobytes. It's probably more like 100 kilobytes after it's compressed. So it's showing you the uncompressed original file before it's touched at all. So it is good to see, I guess, like this is the code from the developer, not touched, how big it is. That's, I guess, how it's helpful. However, it can be a little misleading because the file after it's compressed by the cache or the CDN might actually not be that big at all anymore. So just keep that in mind too. It's something I noticed recently. So let's see here. Yeah. So basically here, everything, any asset above the fold, every kilobyte matters. And when I say kilobyte, I'm talking like if you can shave off 10 kilobytes off from something loading above the fold, like that hero image, that will have an impact on LCP. I know it sounds crazy and it's nitpicking, but like I can't stress enough, if you're loading like featured images, hero background images, like compress those as much as possible without losing wherever your preference for quality comes into play.
Do you get so nitpicky? Like WAF2 files are pretty much what everybody's using for fonts now, but those are generally bigger than other font files, aren't they?
I think you might have that.
Is that backwards?
Way around?
Okay.
Yeah, TTF files are the old ones that are bigger that should no longer be used. WAF2 is the most recent version.
Okay.
So there's like, so TTF, then it went WAF, then it went WAF2. Like that's the progression kind of. Make sure you're using WAF2 on your sites. So not WAF, not TTF. And the reason is because WAF2 has the highest rate of compression. So the file sizes should be a little smaller than anything else.
Because that's going to have to load. I mean, your fonts are always going to load, right? So that feels like one of the things, if you can knock that out, that's going to load on every single page. So if you can use any,
correct,
if you can get any gains there, that's definitely good.
And I see a lot of TTF fonts still. And I think the problem with that is, say you're working with a designer, a lot of designers use TTF fonts, I think, in like Photoshop and stuff like that. And then it gets translated over into loading the TTFs on the website somehow. And so they just never change that when the exact same font is available from Google as a WAF2. So just make sure you're loading the WAF2 fonts. And then the other problem with that is libraries like Font Awesome, Dash Icons, all these icon libraries. These are frustrating because optimization plugins, it's not like Unused CSS where we can go parse the CSS, strip out what shouldn't load, and load the rest, and then delay stuff on user interaction. With fonts, we can't go into a WAF2 and like pick stuff out of it. And so there's lots of font libraries will just load the entire library. And so I'll see Font Awesome libraries of like 100 kilobytes. And it's just, and they're loading the entire library, anticipating that you might need any icon that's in that library. And you're literally only using 2 icons. So the way to get around this is to use like a kit. You can go to Font Awesome and make kits so that you're only loading the icons that you're using. That's one way to do it. Better way to do it, I like, is to use like a generate blocks and like using SVG code exactly. So like on our Perfmatters homepage, we have a few SVG icons, and they're Font Awesome free ones, but it's literally just SVG code from the Font Awesome site that I've dumped into generate blocks in that block.
Right.
So it's only used there once, super lightweight, and I don't load a library at all. So that's if you have a solution with like blocks where you can just add SVGs, whether inline or file and lazy loaded, like that's a better way to do it. But again, sometimes you got to work with what you're given too. So another, I'll just point this out here because I see it so often, is like Elementor has icons, very popular one. Sometimes that'll throw warnings. They have an option in one of their tabs. You can inline that. I would pay attention to see if it impacts anything else performance-wise, but like that will fix, I think, one of the font warnings regarding that one. So some solutions do have like toggles to help fix their fonts.
I see in your tip here, you have some tips on reducing image sizes and trying to keep images under 100 kilobytes. Greg had asked what image format you recommend using, and I see WebP and AVIF in here.
Let me pull this up here. So I still use WebP on all of our sites. Now, part of that is because I have not taken the time and I have not had the time to go through and make sure everything's converted with a bulk. Because even if you use like a tool, I recommend ShortPixel or Magify. Even if you use those and you go bulk optimize everything, there's probably going to be a few images like, whoa, what happened here? And so I just haven't had time to make sure I'm looking at everything to go through that process.
Sure.
And AIF is the smallest. Like AIF should usually result in this smallest size. And I just pulled this up. Whoops, almost dragged the tab here. If you're curious, the browser support for AIF, I don't know if I'm even pronouncing that right.
We got you.
Is around 93% now. So that's another thing I've been waiting for is the browser support, because in the past with things like WebP and AIF, with ShortPixel and WebP, you have this picture tag. And basically what it does is it swaps from the JPEG or PNG to the WebP if the browser supports it. So you have this two-pronged process, which is annoying for performance. And you have two files. It's just, I've hated that for years, but it's what we've had to work with. We're finally to the point where you can skip, I think. So AIF is 93%. You can look here, caniuse.com, make your own judgment. If you want to drop IE11 with images, I would say go for it at this point, probably. I would say 93% is pretty darn good. Now, if you want to look at WebP, WebP is sitting at almost 97%. Again, you're losing IE2. So if you're going to go straight WebP, I would almost just say go straight AIF at this point. But that is an option. You can load them directly. I don't remember if WordPress supports AIF out of the box yet or not. I tweeted about that a while back and I forget or not. Someone will have to check on that. WordPress does support loading WebPs directly now. You can just skip it. You'd have to check on the AIF one. But again, you might want to look at that instead of running this two-pronged process to save on file size and stuff. It depends on, do you think you still have clients running IE11 somewhere in other countries? That might be further behind, or corporate clients. Depends on stuff like that. But yeah, WebP or AIF is what I recommend. And 100 kilobytes or less. I cannot stress this enough. This is just the benchmark I found to work that's the best for folks. For those hero images, like at least get them under 100 kilobytes. I see so many like 400, 500 kilobyte hero images, like always in Elementor. I see it every day. And yeah, just if you can get them under 100 kilobytes, that's, thank you, Greg. So it says WordPress 6.5 has AIF support. So if you want to skip it, go straight to AIF. You could try doing that. Yeah, under 100 kilobytes. Part 2 of Norm's network size is lazy loading. Can't stress enough. Now, WordPress core does have native lazy loading. Like if you don't install anything, it is going to do like the lazy loading with Chrome. However, there's just tweaking things and then working with the optimization plugin. It's just not there yet. It's still better performance to use as a plugin, in my opinion, because of all the other things working in tandem with like auto excluding and all this other stuff. So you can enable lazy loading we have that in our Perfmatters plugin. Go to lazy loading, enable images, and then we have the exclude leading images. So basically this is top to bottom from how the DOM or HTML loads. Like say maybe like 2 is usually a safe amount, 2 or 3, because usually that'll be like a logo, maybe getting down to the featured image, your LCP image on a blog post, stuff like that. And then we have iframes and videos if you want to lazy load those. And then YouTube preview thumbnails. If you're using YouTube, this is a lifesaver because YouTube is a performance killer. unless you stop it from loading everything until you click on the video itself. I'm
sure
Kyle knows this using the videos.
I just have to bring up the irony of we're using Google Core Web Vitals here to benchmark all of this, and then it's like, how do we turn every Google product off? We want to load Google fonts locally, lazy load these YouTube videos. It's like everything that they do is what's making these websites terrible.
Yep. And ironic, yeah, and like with Google Analytics 4 now, I think that script is like 120 kilobytes, the GA4. It's ridiculous. And like they want us to load small files and yet their own analytics file. But again, these teams do not talk to each other, and the Google Analytics team does not care what the Core Web Vitals team is working on. Guarantee it. Unfortunately. And then we have, exclusions here. This I think is under advanced, as Kyle mentioned earlier. We have exclude by parent selectors. So let's say you have a mega menu. It's a popular culprit. I hate mega menu. I'll just be fair and say that. I hate complex menus. But if you have that, I see lots of people loading like thumbnails in their mega menu sometimes, or just like little image icons too. Like maybe you don't want those lazy loaded, and maybe they should never be lazy loaded. So like you could use, a lot of times those types of products won't have a unique class on the image itself. So you can't just say like go exclude like this image icon URL. And so you can then usually find a parent class further up in that menu to then exclude everything below it. So again, that's a little complicated. If you have problems with that or need help with that, like reach out to us. We're happy to find a parent class on something if you need help. But that comes in handy if you really need to fine tune the lazy loading. Threshold. This is basically just how many images are going to load as soon as possible. So let's say you have a, I usually like to use around 300 pixels is what I think I use on our sites. But this is like the viewport distance. So, and how soon they load when you're scrolling up. So like, let's say you use like 1200 pixels. Anything outside of the viewport, 1200 pixels down is going to start loading right away. So that would be almost like another tire screen size at that point.
Right.
Like you have your 1200 pixels and you have another 1200 pixels, and those images will be available right away. The problem with that is then you have more images impacting your performance. So you want to find a good kind of middle ground for your site. Like if you leave it at 0, maybe you'll see the images flashing a little bit because they're loading in too late. So maybe you want to say like do 300, 600 pixels. Like look at your site, scroll up and down, see how smooth it feels. And like you could increase it if you want it to feel a little smoother type of thing. And just see, maybe like use GT metrics, see how many images are actually loading on that page, and you can gauge like, oh, okay, another one dropped off.
Right. Yeah, I was just looking at mine. I have it set to 200. So.
But yeah, that's a pretty aggressive amount. So yeah, and that's pretty close to what I have. I have this 300. So, and yeah, so we went over that. And yeah, that's just about. I guess I didn't mention the warning there. This should be defer off-screen images is technically the warning that we were trying to fix there. Next is largest Contentful Paint element. So this is probably the one that everybody is curious about, and I kind of left it till last. So I get so many tickets of people saying, "Why is this still here?" And this is not a warning that you're trying to fix or clear out. Like unused CSS, like. It's possible to fix literally everything there, sure, and get it to go green and drop down and not see it anymore. Same with most of those other warnings. You're always going to have an LCP just based on, it's going to always flag whatever the largest thing is to load on your site above the fold, whether that's the image, text, etc. So just keep that in mind. You're not trying to fix this, you're trying to improve it. And the reason I like to think of it is in two parts, basically. You have everything else that impacts LCP, and then you have the LCP element itself. And so I like to take those, you could do it in reverse order. You could try optimizing the LCP element first, and then going back and doing everything else, or you can do it the way we're doing it. We're doing everything else first, and then tackling the LCP element. And so the first thing I recommend doing is enabling our preload critical images feature in Perfmatters. So we'll go back over here. It's under the preloading tab. Let me get rid of these here. So we have preload critical images. Again, just like exclude leading, usually it's safe to like kind of keep these the same. And so I would probably use 2 or 3 on most sites as a good like starting point. And basically what that's going to do is move that image to the top of the waterfall. So preloading forces it to load as soon as possible. If the image, and you would be surprised if you look at a site, like look at any, I always use Elementor as an example, but nothing against Elementor. They're actually making some good improvements with performance lately, but that's what I see in tickets. So if you have a large complex Elementor site, if you look at the LCP image, it's probably loading 40, 50 requests down. It's very, very common to load that far down. And so Google is basically telling you, like, they want you to load it sooner. Like, it should load. That should be like one of the very first things loading after maybe perhaps your logo, the HTML doc, and stuff like that. And so preloading it just forces it to bump up, load as soon as possible. And that will have a positive impact on your LCP metrics. Part 2 is excluding individual images. Or wait, let me read this. I think I have a typo here. Oh, yeah, I think that, yeah, let me go back here. I see what I did. Preload. Let me see here. Okay, I think I was just trying to point out our filter here. So this is maybe more for the advanced folks. We basically have a filter where you can, let's say, again, mega menu, common example I see. You have a things that shouldn't be preloaded. Maybe they're getting caught up by our preloader. So we have a filter where you can exclude things from preloading, and you can use like a parent class even. So we go very, very deep down the rabbit hole as far as you can go. So you can really fine tune it and say, like, I want to preload my logo. I want to preload nothing in between until I get down to my featured image on my blog post. So that's essentially what I was trying. I'll reword this before I give you the slide because I was confusing myself. So basically, the point is we have ways in our plugin, if you want to go down the rabbit hole, to really tune in on the preloading there to how everything should load.
That would make sense with the menu stuff because a lot of that's not going to be showing on the screen, right, when the page loads until you hover on a menu or open a hamburger menu or whatever. It's not even being shown. And if you're getting caught up in the preload, that's kind of a waste to it's a waste of preloading that when you could be spending those resources on something that's actually going to be showing on the page.
Yeah, and there's other things like sometimes sidebars will actually be coded so they're loading first. There's other way crazy examples I've seen of where things are loading first. Yeah, pop-ups. Yeah, there's so many different things. And there is ways to automate some of this too, which we're looking at. But the problem with that is then you have to store it as well. And then it doesn't happen right away. And we prefer the lightweight approach, even if it takes a little more tweaking. Where you can like literally instantly test things as you need it. Otherwise, you're waiting on like repeat visits to test this and stuff like that. So next is, what about like hero background images in CSS? Like, unfortunately, we can't automatically see those in the HTML. but you can still manually preload those. Like we have this individual preload feature here. So you can go here, like put in the image here, like choose image, and then we have devices and location. So like, let's say you can go into our doc, and if you don't know how to find the location, but like find the post ID, I have an example in our doc of how to do that. But like the post ID of maybe the about page is with a hero image is 25. So we'd put the post ID there. And maybe we're just trying to optimize it on mobile and don't care about desktop. Like maybe the LCP is fine on desktop, which in a lot of cases and a lot of sites, I'm actually just focused on mobile. I usually don't even worry about desktop because after we go through all those other things we did,
right?
LAJS, like most people's LCP is completely fine, and most people's sites pass Core Web Vitals a lot of times on desktop anyways.
Sure.
So mobile is usually what I focus on. So a lot of times with preloads, I'll just focus on mobile. And even you can fine tune if you want to really fine tune things, like you can do desktop as well, but like a lot of times I'll just fine tune in the mobile. And so if you do mobile, just make sure you have a separate mobile cache enabled. Almost everything has that these days. And yeah, that's fixing this warning that you probably see is preload largest Contentful Paint image. That's Google just saying they want it to load right away. Part 3 is using fetch priority. So this is something that has happened like over the last year or two. WordPress core added this. And this is, think of it like preload, but less powerful. It's a hint to tell the browser what the priority of an image or asset should be. And you can set it to like high or low. So in the past with like preloads, think we preload something, but say we're preloading like 5 things. How would we know? How could we rearrange the order of that? There wouldn't really be a way. So fetch is kind of a way of the similar thing, but you can kind of like go more granular, saying like, I want to fetch this image as high, and then I still want to fetch this other thing, but fetch it as low priority. So it's, you can kind of go into things more granular, but again, preloading is more powerful. If you're only wanting to use one, like preloads is the way to go. And we have a feature in Perfmatters to disable core fetch. And what we found is, unfortunately, WordPress added this, and we have seen time and time again that it's adding fetch on the wrong image or wrong thing, like below the fold. Fetch should never be on something below the fold, which is the nature of things, because they're adding a high priority, basically saying like something way down should be loading higher. And no, that's not what should be happening. So I think WordPress over time will improve that. But for right now, we have this disable core fetch, and then we have a way in Perfmatters to say, I want to disable core fetch, and then I want to add fetch myself. So it's essentially like letting you do it yourself instead of letting core do it. And you can add it on a image, link, or script. And so you would put in like, so like say you have a class on an image somewhere, like my class or something. And you want to do a high priority. And then it's the same as preloads. You can choose a location if you want it, device. If you don't put any location, it's just site-wide. So that's, and then we have a feature search by parent selector. So a lot of times, again, we'll see like maybe that image doesn't have a unique class on it or something to target. And so you can search by a parent selector, which is like a class above it. And then it would add fetch on something below it. That's a little confusing, but like if you're a developer, you probably know what I'm talking about. But if not, like you can email us and I'm happy to explain that more if you're running into issues with that. Okay. And then after you preloaded your LCP image, we kind of went over this a little bit, but or utilize fetch. It's important just make sure you're not lazy loading your LCP stuff, elements. Now, we do automatically exclude images from lazy loading if you're using our preload critical feature, fetch priority, stuff like that. So that's why we try to automate this as much as possible so that nothing gets lazy loaded. But this is a common warning I think people have probably seen was LCP image was lazy loaded. That's just saying, Google's saying like, you don't want to lazy load this. And then that warning before is probably saying you want to preload this. So no lazy loading. You want it to load sooner, top of the waterfall. And that's basically what you can do to optimize your LCP element. And if people are still wondering about those other metrics, let me go back here a little bit. This TTFB, hopefully you can see my mouse here, but I'm pointing in the bottom right here, like load delay, load time, render delay, TTFB. All of these are going to be greatly impacted by the other things that we did and then what we just went through with the LCP element itself. However, you're always going to have some metrics here, to be honest. You're not going to be able to fix literally everything right here. So just, I wouldn't be too OCD about this. Your main thing would be to get this main time down. See this largest contentful paint of 4. This is technically 4 seconds. That's what you're wanting to get down. Just focus on that one big number. Another trick here I've seen, and I guess it's not literally a trick, but is purposely making your LCP element a header or text element instead of images. So actually, let me pull their site up to me here. So on WordPress.com, this is the example I was using. You can see their LCP element is actually detected as the header text. So even though maybe there's a couple images above the fold, Google's still saying that this is the largest contentful paint. So it doesn't necessarily always mean the heaviest weight, because I'm sure these are heavier in terms of file sizes than this. But you can structure your site in a way that, notice that their LCP here is gray, meaning it's not red, and it's under 2.5 seconds. So you can structure your site in a way to maybe make that your LCP element as a way to get around this more. Because if we expand this, go to desktop, it's still a great, in my opinion, a great looking site. You still got your images there.
Right.
But the LCP element, when you go down to mobile, is technically because that's up there. So think about that maybe too sometimes when you're designing your site, and you could even redesign your site. I've known some bloggers, I think it was, I forget who it was, but he redesigned his site specifically for LCP with the headers like that.
Actually, in my new agency website, there's no like hero image or anything. So it's just text in the heroes of all the pages. So still looks nice, but saves me from having to load those images at the top of the page.
Yep. So that is a great way to, if you want to go like, knee deep into the LCP stuff, that's a great way. I think we bring up something else.
Testing all my scores as we were doing this. My LCP is not doing great, but I'm also testing new hosting right now. So I have to untangle too many things to live here on the call. We did have somebody that asked a question about the text thing. Daniel here, he had said, I don't get why text/headings are being highlighted in my LCP. I think that's probably one part of the statement, which you just explained. But then he said as 3.5 seconds. So if we are seeing like our LCP element is just text, which shouldn't be very big in terms of like file size, but we're seeing it load in really slow, like 3.5 seconds. What could be the culprit of that?
So that means you need to go back and do all those other things we just did that are probably having some impact at some level on the text itself and when it's loading. And preloading the fonts could be another thing, because if it's a font itself, think of how that loads in. Maybe it needs to be preloaded faster. And I was just going to give another example. Find it here. Yeah, so see this this is the WordPress site, the same WordPress.com site. And notice how, I can get my cursor here. Notice how there's still stuff that they could do. They could probably improve here. Like they're just under 2.5 seconds. Like that, I mean, they're basically just under the threshold. So if I was them, I would click into the LCP tab, go through all these warnings that we just went through and see like what else is probably impacting this text LCP element at some level. And looking through here, they have render blocking resources, which is CSS. So running unused CSS would help fix that. They have unused CSS. They have images that are probably too big. This is saying serve next gen image format. Again, now this warning is actually a little tricky. You don't have to use WebP or AIF to fix this warning. If they detect a 7 kilobyte savings or more, this is the savings right here, potential savings. If they detect 7 kilobytes or more, they will flag this warning. But you don't necessarily have to use WebP or AIF. You could use JPEG and completely fix this warning. So I just point that out, kind of a tidbit that people think you always have to do the other way. But properly sized images. We didn't go over that one, but yeah, that could definitely, maybe I'll add that. I'll throw that in the slide here before I give it to you. I forgot about that one actually. But properly sized images goes right back to your image size again. You want to make sure you're loading the right size images. So some image optimization plugins do this. And again, just be smart about your image. Like if you're working in Photoshop or Affinity Designer, something like that, think about how big the desktop image is going to be. Don't load something in twice the size of the desktop image and then let it try to resize down on itself. WordPress does have responsive images, but it just does not work as great as you think. So think about, like, I guess, how big that div ever will be on that page holding that image. Do that size, and then it'll be smaller on the other ones.
I think too, in building WordPress websites, where everybody I know is building desktop first and then worrying about mobile, so you're most likely saving those images out, automatically thinking about them being 2,000 pixels wide if they need to take up the full screen. You know what I mean? And then once you think about, okay, well now it's on a mobile screen and it's only like 400 pixels wide, that's a lot of extra size for no good reason.
And WordPress does crop them and have using source set, but again, their source set is not as it's not as accurate to say like it's going to fix every warning in page speed insights. It's not that accurate. They do basically the best they can. But yeah, just seeing here, like you can see, there's more stuff impacting this than just that text. So they could preload the fonts, they could fix all this other stuff. That would bring that number down. So hopefully that answers that question. Next is disabling plugins or JSS, CSS. So let's say you've gone through all this other stuff and you still see a few stragglers loading that maybe shouldn't be, or you're trying to really fine tune the performance for the LCP. We do have our script manager in Perfmatters. Again, this can be for perhaps some more advanced folks, but feel free to play around with it. You can't really, you can break things for sure on your front end, but you can always just toggle it right back off with a single click, so it's easy. This is under we recently, because we redesigned this here for JS and CSS, we moved this under the tools here. You can enable script manager, go in here, and you can see you can disable things. You can go at the plugin level. So you did disable current URL everywhere, then add exclusions. You can do it at the script level here, the exclusions again. So you can go as granular as you want. And we have I don't think I have it on here. We have our MU mode here, which if you enable that, when you go into disable, it will have a little label saying MU mode. If you disable the plugin at this level with MU mode, that will disable the entire plugin from loading, like MySQL queries, inline code, literally everything. It's as if the plugin wasn't even there, basically.
I feel like plugins are getting better about not littering your page with things that's not being used, but some of us are still using older plugins, and not every plugin's taking things to that extreme.
They are, but you'd be surprised how many people I still see using the script manager and maybe just for one or two things, because they can't fix it in any other way. But like you said, plugins are getting better. Another thing is that we're seeing less short code, so blocks are getting better. All this is getting better, in my opinion, over time. But if you need to fine tune anything, you can't always hype in the script manager. But I usually recommend doing all this other stuff first, leaving this to the last. If you start with the script manager first, usually not the best scenario, or you're going to end up confusing yourself with some stuff.
Right. That's definitely one of the more advanced and powerful features.
Yeah. Okay, next is speculative loading techniques. So not everything is about final page speed scores or tests, even though that's kind of everything we just went over. I always like to, you need to think of the user experience, like how fast the site feels when you're navigating through it. Like you could do all this stuff for page speed scores, and then if your site feels like crap, it's probably not going to end up in a good result still. And so there's different speculative loading mechanisms you can use. And technically, this will improve LCP for the user, but technically it might not always be for the speed test, if that makes sense.
Right.
But again, at some level, it might have some impact. So pre-connect will allow the browser to connect to like an HTTP, or makes an early connection, basically. And it saves on the DNS lookup, TCP, TLS. And easiest way to view an example of this is for like a CDN. If you're not using Cloudflare, but you're still using, a lot of people are using Bunny, I know, CDN these days, Key CDN. So if you have a custom CDN URL, you can pre-connect that domain, and it will essentially cut back on that DNS, TCP, and TLS on that next lookup. So it won't happen on the first load because it has no way to know that that's there, but it will happen on the next click, essentially going there, because that'll see your tag, if that makes sense. So consistent going through your site, it will help. And so we have this here in, let's get rid of this other stuff here. In Perfmatters, so let's say you have a custom domain, you go, cdn.domain.com, whatever domain URL is, that will add it to your code, and then on subsequent requests throughout your site, that'll save on that DNS TCP lookup. So it's not a huge improvement, but every little thing helps. And again, you can also use this on third-party requests. So like think Google Ads, any type of third-party request that you think like maybe there's a lookup happening. Like you can go through your scripts and see like that. You don't need this for internal requests. This is only for external stuff. Prefetch. So this will allow you to automatically fetch the resources required to render a URL in the background after you hover over a link. So this basically just results in faster load times, especially when navigating, clicking through menus and stuff.
If you want to make your site feel lightning fast, turn this toggle on, because you will instantly notice a difference in how the actual website feels for a user.
And so we have this feature called Instant Page. And that's basically what that does. It's a tiny little script, and it basically just adds prefetch to everything on hover. And a little trick, and everything will be just a little bit faster. However, as of recently, there is now pre-render, and WordPress performance team just released their speculative loading plugin. And I'm actually recommending this over our own feature of Instant Page. So Kyle, I know you like Instant Page, but
I'm gonna pass out.
I am using this on our sites, and I have turned off Instant Page. I'm completely fine telling everyone that. We've thought about adding this to our own plugin, but again, being a small team and the WordPress core team themselves actually working on this, I don't think it makes sense for us to really add this.
Yeah.
They have hundreds, thousands of eyeballs helping improve this, and people from the Google Chrome team themselves. So it just makes sense to, piggyback off them for this. Anything in core, I always am a big fan of using if it's good.
do you suspect this will go into Core, or is it just through a plugin?
So that's the big question, and I was just going to bring this up here. This is the plugin here, speculative loading plugin from the WordPress performance team. You can see it already has 20,000 installs. Actually, I've been tweeting out about this and sharing stuff on social. And basically, what this does, it goes a step further than prefetch. It actually renders the content ready to be shown when like you're hovering on a link. So instead of just gathering the recourses to render, it's actually rendering them behind the scenes. Now, obviously, this does have a little more impact on your server performance. So I should throw that out there. But again, it's very minimal. And again, I'm using this plugin now on our site.
To be fair, Brian builds very lightweight sites. The Perfmatters site isn't loading a ton of shit like most of our sites are.
That is very true. And if you have a very large and complex site and you're on shared hosting that's already struggling, then you might want to consider.
Go watch our last webinar where we told you to get off shared hosting and then come back.
But again, I don't know. I'm hoping this will get into WordPress core, if that was your question.
Yeah.
Because actually, here, now that you all got me geeking out about this, here, I gotta go up a step further.
You said if we're using that speculative plugin, then we need to turn off the prefetch.
Yeah, it just you wouldn't need it. It's like almost redundant at that point. Gotcha. Pre-render is going to be more powerful. Now, the other caveat is pre-render is still new. It's really only working in Chrome and Edge at the moment. It's not working in Firefox. And I think Firefox will add it based on the popularity of this already. Firefox doesn't like to fall behind what Chrome makes popular. But I say look at your traffic. I looked at my traffic the other day and it was like, I think it was 85% Chrome. So for me, that's just like, okay, I'll take the extra performance on Chrome and for Google, and I would go with that. And like, unfortunately, Firefox users just won't have that.
Yeah, but it's not going to ruin. I mean, it's not ruining the experience for Firefox users either.
Yeah, it just means it's not. I had prefetch technically before for Firefox users, and now we don't. But again, I'm looking at that 85%, and it has a huge impact performance.
That's the interesting thing about this slide here is a lot of these things you're talking about are going to make a difference for the user, but not necessarily the test, right? Because the Core Web Vitals test and the PageSpeed Insights test aren't going to click through to multiple pages and then see how quick they load the next time and all those kinds of things. But it's interesting. It's like my kids all go to school and they have to do standardized testing at the end of the year, right? So the state's putting on this test. Everybody in the state takes it. So the teachers all year are just teaching to this test, right? Like everything they're teaching is just for this test. But the point of the test is the kids know these things. I use that as an example because that's kind of what we're doing here. Like the point of having Core Web Vitals and all these metrics is to make the experience better for users. But we focus on the things that make the test better and kind of ignore these things that actually make the experience better for the user. So even though this doesn't show up on your tests, I would definitely recommend to spend some time on this because in the end, that's what we're doing all of this for, is just to make the website faster for the visitor. So I think all these things are definitely worth doing.
And taking that further, while it won't improve your test scores for the lab data, I think it actually can improve your real user metric scores, which you're failing or passing on, because we're going to dive into INP a little later. But INP is basically the measurement of like how fast things respond after you click on something. So if you think about that, that means that Google is actually measuring people navigating through your site.
Right.
Which means at some level, the real user metrics will detect if you're speeding up the load process, bouncing around things between your site. So while it won't show up on like a page speed test, it could actually improve. All of these can improve your real user metrics. And since you had me geeking out, I just installed this quick on the dev site. But this is what that speculative loading plugin shows. So like they have prefetch, which is, so this would be instant page, essentially what our instant page was. You could still do that. But this is what has me all excited is the pre-render. And you can do different sets of how aggressive it is. So I like to use the on hover. You can use on-click, which I actually don't see any point of even having that one. Or you could do slightest suggestion, which means I think it's starting to do things more in the viewport. But again, I don't use that one. I'm still big on. I've worked at hosting providers, and I've seen how things impact server performance. So I'm very OCD about that myself too. So I usually recommend the on hover, because that's kind of going to give you the best of both worlds and still take advantage of the pre-rendered stuff.
Excellent. I like that rabbit hole. Thank you for taking us down that one.
And again, we are kind of waiting. If they add that to core, WordPress core, we will probably end up taking instant page out of our plugin altogether, and then just saying, you know, go use this plugin if anyone asks, type of a thing. But it's kind of up in the air at the moment. But again, I'm all about, if WordPress core team adds something and we have it in our plugin and we don't need it, I would much rather have you use core than our plugin. I would rather do that myself.
Yeah. The entire premise of how much subtraction by addition we do in the WordPress space is very annoying. So I'm glad you have that same philosophy, even though it takes something, you know, valuable out of your plugin.
Yeah. So quick summary, just everything we've gone over. So everything with LCP is server response time, that HTML doc size, huge impact on LCP. Again, don't skip this. If you do everything else we did today, but you don't optimize your server response time, you're still going to struggle. So go back, watch the previous video if you have questions about that, on caching and stuff like that. LCP, you want to get under 2.5 seconds. Remember that Google's using the throttled mobile 4G connection. Minify your JSS and CSS. You want to remove unused CSS. Can delay your JS, unused JS, until it's needed on user interaction. You want to defer your JS. Any JS that maybe is not delayed, you want to defer the rest of that to eliminate render blocking resources and help avoid chaining critical requests. Always host your fonts locally. You can add, swap, and preload them. Decrease any large resources like image optimization, the large font libraries, which we went into, type of thing. Lazy load images below the fold. Preload your LCP image. Make sure to exclude images that are above the fold from lazy loading. So there's a lot. I mentioned lazy loading a lot. That's actually a very big part that I think some people misunderstand. That is, you really want to fine tune that as well. Then fetch priority is, you can even go a little deeper with that if you want to. Disable JS and CSS or entire plugins from loading where they shouldn't with the script manager if you really want to go down the rabbit hole. And then take advantage of the speculative loading techniques, which we just went over to. While they might not help the speed test, they could impact your real user real user scores. And of course, how fast your site even feels to the person browsing it.
Right.
So yeah.
So if you're watching, take a screenshot of this page. We'll have the entire presentation ready for you by tomorrow sometime. I'll make sure to post that. But this is the good checklist to have if you're doing the optimizations.
And I did try to include links on each slide to the actual, like some to the Perfmatters. So if like you're viewing the slides later, you hopefully should be able to click into most things into our plugin and like get right to the doc and stuff like that and how it works.
And if you're a Perfmatters customer and you're still having trouble, send in a ticket. I hate giving Brian more work, but he's so awesome, and his brother at handling support requests. I thought maybe the first few times I put in tickets, you were just being like real nice to me because I had a community of people and going above and beyond for me. But then I talked to everybody and everybody's like, no, he like went in my whole site and fixed all these things, and now it's awesome. It's a very good support. You are the high marks for support in WordPress space. And if you're not using Perfmatters and you want to check it out, there is 20% off if you use the code the admin bar when you check out. You got
if you do reach out, you know, you can reach out today, but I would prefer if you reach out on a Monday or Friday afternoon, because right after this call, I'm about to go right back into doing tickets. But again, if you do reach out today, We'll get back to you as soon as we can. But if it can hold off on Monday, I would prefer that.
I didn't think about when I was telling everybody to do this. So yeah,
no, that's fine. We always do this on a Friday. So
if y'all want to make Brian work all weekend, go ahead and send him all your issues right now.
But again, yeah, send it and I'll get back to you. We always close out tickets same day. I don't know if I should say that here, but we always close them out same day. So we've never failed at that yet. Unless it's more of a like complex development issue, that we're going back and forth.
Right.
Then it might take a few days, but we always respond within the same day. So except on the weekend.
You got time for a few questions here? I saved some here. All right, excellent. Toby asked, does a Vimeo, I'm guessing Vimeo video that is slightly above the fold contribute to LCP?
Yes. And unfortunately, Vimeo videos have the same problem that the YouTube videos have, as in they are a performance killer. If you look at like probably your unused JS warnings, page speed insights on that page, you're probably going to see some big scripts coming from Vimeo. So yeah, it can. Two things on that though is we do have a task to add thumbnails if it's possible for Vimeos. Basically, for YouTube, we have this thumbnail preview feature where it adds a thumbnail, you click on it, then it loads the video. So nothing from YouTube loads until you click on it. We want to do the same thing for Vimeo. And we do have a task and we have had requests for that. So if we do add that, that basically would fix the entire problem, because you could have a video up there, nothing from Vimeo would load till you click it. The other suggestion for that would be, if you can move it, rearrange your page and move it below the fold. If it's an iframe, you can enable our iframe lazy loading, and it will lazy load the iframe for Vimeo. And that will have the same impact. However, it would have to be below the fold out of the viewport, because lazy load only works out of the viewport. Yeah, those are the two things.
Excellent. All right, this next question has to do with what the hell is the viewport, because every screen is different, and this is a dynamic thing we're talking about here. So when we're talking about Core Web Vitals and what Google's measuring here when we do a page speed insight test, is the little screenshot they give you accurate, or what should we be going off of?
Yeah, I forget. There is a way to see that, but I forget where it is. But yeah, you're optimizing for like an iPhone type of screen. Okay. Think of that. So I don't like to think of it as specific dimensions, because there's so many different phones out there and stuff. I just always assume that I'm optimizing for this screen size. No. So that's what I'm doing. But again, I don't look at specific dimensions, and I really don't look at tablets either. I kind of treat tablets as this kind of like in between thing. Yeah. And so like desktop, you can optimize for desktop, although usually, like I said before, most of the time I don't see clients even having problems on desktop. Once in a while, but most of the times it's just optimizing for iPhone or Android phone. And again, like small screens.
I'm kind of like your example of going to your analytics and seeing how many people are using Firefox. Go and see how many people are loading your website on a tablet, and it is usually not very many.
And again, you're going to see some differences, because like the viewport here, we can put this around, on different phones might end up being slightly higher or lower. So like, I don't worry about those types of things. Like on one phone, you might have one more image load sooner for lazy loading, whereas opposed on another phone, it might have that one lazy loaded. So I don't go that fine tuned. Just think of screens as small, and that's about it.
All right, I don't know how much you know about this software, but it says, how do you do lazy load with Short Pixel AI? They won't allow to disable lazy load on their side. Do you know anything about that?
With Short Pixel AI, usually we recommend using their lazy loading. And it's like you said, they don't allow you to disable it. So there's nothing we can do there about that. But we do have a lot of clients that use that. We've seen it. We see it all the time. And that a lot of people use that specifically because they want to fix that properly resized image warning, because they go further than like the source set media library in WordPress. They will really fine tune which size image is loading. That's why people would want to use something like this Short Pixel AI, as opposed to just Short Pixel. But yeah, they don't let you disable lazy loading. So I would keep lazy loading off in our plugin. And then for the exclusions, sometimes you do end up having to do the lazy load exclusions in Short Pixel itself. They have sections kind of like our boxes where you can do exclusions. So sometimes you got to do more fine tuning in their plugin as opposed to our plugin.
Excellent. All right. We had a question about this person actually mentioned an issue on Elementor's GitHub, I think, but a lot of WordPress users complaining of page speed insights reporting an over 2-second LCP, even on all text sites. I just ran a performance test on perfmatters.io, and the LCP is 1.5. So we know we can get it under 2, but have you heard of this being a specific issue?
I have not heard of that being a specific issue. And I guarantee you that if we went back, I forget what it was, our very first presentation where you were still using Elementor, I think, at that point in time. And you had you built Elementor the way people should be using it, in my opinion, where you had nothing dynamic type of thing. It's like all static. And I guarantee you we had LCP under 2 seconds on your Elementor site. Yeah. Now, and I haven't seen any recent issues regarding this either. So I would have to see more about that site. Like I would have to know, like, what are they using for cache? Like it could be a TTFB problem. There could be all sorts of things going on with that. So, but I don't know of any Elementor issues at the moment. And I work on Elementor sites every day, multiple Elementor sites every day. So.
And I apologize to them. They sent a slug for an actual URL for that, but I couldn't grab all that and do this at the same time. So I'll try to follow up and find that.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested in knowing and seeing what that is, but yeah, I haven't heard anything.
All right. Frederick asked about Retina images. Yes or no? Does this affect the speed and LCP in particular?
Yes. I mean, it's going to impact your speed because basically, if you want an image to be crystal clear for Retina, it kind of needs to be, 2 times, I think, the size for Retina. And so while we were talking about the size of the div, that's why I would never say you want to make images smaller than the div because of Retina itself. But again, it depends on what device you're on too, because I'm on a Mac, which is Retina screen, so I don't think of Retina ever. I'm not sure if you do. I'm not sure if you're on a Mac, Kyle, or Windows, but I never think of Retina. But I just size it how I want it to be on my screen, and essentially that is Retina. But I know some of these, I think Windows users have this problem more, and I used to be on Windows, where you have to think about Retina a little bit more. And technically, the theoretical size is 2x. The original would be a Retina image. So
you're going to have to just use some judgment on that too. Like how important is it that this image is crystal clear? Because if it's a photography website and you're showing how tack sharp you can get an image, it's going to make a lot of difference. If you're pulling an image off of stock photography just to throw as your featured image in your blog post, probably doesn't matter that much anymore. You know, it's not the same thing.
Yeah. And again, if you're on a Mac, I just like, if I'm working on a Perfmatters doc and I'm uploading a screenshot that I want to put in the doc, I think about the size of that div, and the image might be just slightly larger, but it's about the size of the div, and that's as far as I really go.
Speaking of how far you will go, I'm sure you've wanted to tell people that are sending in 1 million support tickets that they're at the point of diminishing returns here. So without calling those people out by name, how do you decide when you've done enough optimization?
I mean, a lot of times I can tell from the page speed insights. I mean, if I don't see many warnings there, I would say like you're probably nitpicking at this point. So it really depends on what your speed test looks like. And I mean, I could tell you in 10 seconds from a page speed insight score and a GT metrics test, like I could tell you like if you got work to do or not work to do. But again, this is what I'm doing literally day in and day out. So I've seen a lot of thousands of sites.
Yeah, I mean, I'm having this problem with the client right now. They're considering rebuilding their website, but they don't want to spend a lot of money on it. They don't have the budget to rebuild this website right now. But the entire purpose of them rebuilding is that it was built with WP Bakery and it's slow, right? And I'm afraid they think, and why I'm having many conversations with them, I'm afraid they think if we get their Core Web Vitals passing, that now all their business problems are solved, right? Now their business is doing great again. And while I think passing Core Web Vitals and even like the spectrum within that passing can do good things for you, it's not going to turn around your business, right? So I think you have to like keep that bigger picture in mind. I love performance stuff. I'm a nut for it. I'm going to host a bunch of webinars on it. I talk about it all over my website, but here I am telling a client, like, I don't think we should rebuild your website for a few performance points, you know?
Okay, so a couple points on that is WP Bakery is very slow. I'm just going to point that out.
Sure.
So a rebuild on that specific tool, I actually think would be helpful. Sometimes it does depend on the tool, but WP Bakery, I don't like to throw anyone under the bus, but like it's not great for performance. I would rather use Elementor than WP Bakery.
Sure.
And so let me point this out as well, is right here, eBay, they're not passing Core Web Vitals. Do you think eBay cares?
Not.
You do not. Same with like, I like to use the Taylor Swift examples. Do you think any, what does they call them? Swiftie fans or whatever now? Swifties. Do you think a Swiftie is not going to go to the Taylor Swift website because it's a little slower?
Right.
No. So the reason we care about these things is because most of us have smaller businesses that are not eBay, that are not Taylor Swift, that have to take every competitive edge we can possibly get to succeed. And this goes for, when I was working at Kinsta, like my main job when I started out there was SEO. So I was down the rabbit hole like this stuff, but on the SEO side of things. Same thing goes for that. If you do SEO but have a slow site, you're going to be hurting. Like it's basically just a part in your tool set that you need to work on, but it's a part of everything that's there. So it's not going to, passing Core Web Vitals is not going to fix all your SEO problems, all your traffic problems. That's unfortunately not how it works. It will help, but it's just going to, you got to be good at SEO. Unfortunately, that's just how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, one more that I have in here. I know I see some more come in, but I haven't checked those yet. Christy's asking about the Termageddon cookie consent. I know, like you talked about earlier, I connected you with Hans and them. I've seen the same thing happen as soon as I install their, who is it? Whoever does the cookie consent for them. Now I can't even think of the name.
User-centrics.
Yeah. As soon as I turn that on, my scores just immediately tank. So what's our best bet on that kind of thing?
Yeah, so two things on that is you can delay it on interaction. Now, I'm not a lawyer. So if I still think it's okay that say it doesn't load right away, but when the user literally moves their mouse, then it loads and they have to go through the same process, I think that's okay. But again, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't say, and the Termageddon team, Hans might yell if he sees that. So I don't know what his opinion on that would be. But like we have a quick exclusion in our plugin to easily exclude it. But then, like you said, it does impact performance. The other thing is there is one script that I don't think it's Termageddon. I think it's user-centrics, but this is like intertwined because their plugin works together.
Right.
I think user-centrics preloads one of their scripts, meaning it loads right away and there's nothing we can do about it.
Gotcha.
So even if you do the delay approach, there's one single script that is going to load regardless. However, I think the performance hit is if you're not delaying it altogether. Okay. So there's two layers of that. Like you can try just using delay with it. It should still work. I've seen a lot of people use delay with it and it will work fine. It just loads on that first interaction. But again, I'm not a lawyer, so I think you might have to make your own judgment on like, is that bypassing the legal part of it or not? But
yeah, and some of these things are just so ticky-tacky too. Like the delay thing, delaying the JavaScript is kind of hacky in the sense that like we're just delaying it because we know Google, when it runs these tests, it doesn't have a mouse to move around. If Google decided tomorrow it was going to interact with the page before it ran the test, all of those things are worthless at that point. You know what I mean?
Oh, everyone would be screwed.
Yeah.
except for people running very optimized websites.
Right.
There would be mass chaos in the streets. Yeah. But again, and while it's hacky, I also would lean to the other side too, as in it is unused JS that you're delaying most of the time. Like it's not actually used. So like Google says, like it's not used. Why is it loading? The problem really is on the side of the developers that have scripts that are 200 kilobytes, loading that shouldn't be loading everywhere. So I put it more on the blame of the developers almost rather than Google itself. Like developers just need to make scripts smaller, which can happen, but
there's a tip there from Jackson. He said he's testing all these cookie consent plugins, and this one's 50K. So you guys can check that one out. I think the problem with all these is, you got to test the performance, but you also got to test to make sure this is actually legally compliant, which is a whole other beast that none of us can actually answer because none of us are lawyers.
Reach out to me on the cookie thing if you want. Feel free to send us messages because I do have a few lightweight alternatives. Termageddon is not bad too. I think if you use the delay approach, there's one thing you can't get around, but there's some really bad cookie ones out there too. I've seen. So Termageddon is one of the better ones, but I do have, reach out and I can send you a few examples I have in a doc.
That would be super great because there are also cookie consent plugins in the repo that actually don't stop any cookies from being sent. Like it's just a pop-up that says some words but doesn't actually do anything, so it's really pointless to have on your website, but people don't realize that it's actually not doing the thing that it's meant to do. So you have to keep that in mind too, that not all of them are actually doing something.
Unless you've gone way down the rabbit hole and you are using stuff like Fathom, which doesn't have a cookie, stuff like that to where you might not need one at all. But it's if
it weren't for YouTube, I think I would be there on a couple of my sites, but I have YouTube videos on them, so I'm screwed.
YouTube's such a good one. The cookie consent thing is kind of a nightmare. Ever since that GDPR stuff started, it's been a nightmare for web developers.
All right, well, we're closing up on 2 hours here, so we better wrap this up. I do want to promote our next in this series before we get out of here. Like I said, we'll have the replay of this will stay at whatever link you're watching right now. I'll put it on our website as well. Brian will get me these slides. We'll say Monday. You got stuff to do. Come back Monday.
Okay. I'll get them on Monday. And there's a few things I need to fix too that I've
there you go. Tuesday even. It's fine. I'm not stressing about it. And then we'll have our third episode in this series coming up in August. Right now we have that penciled in for August 9th, and we're going to be tackling FCP that time, I believe. So you want to preview a little bit of what we'll be talking about in that episode?
So FCP, we'll be going over some of the same stuff again because they're kind of intertwined. But we'll be going over more like what can you do to get that very first element to load faster. That's what it's really all about instead of just the largest thing. So FCP is a little easier than LCP, to be honest. LCP, and the reason we tackled LCP first was this is the hardest one that everyone seems to be struggling with, and it's always coming up in tickets that we deal with. So FCP will probably be a little shorter, and there'll be less stuff to go over, but it's always good to optimize for both. So.
Absolutely. Love it. All right, and one more time here, I'm going to run through these. If you haven't hit subscribe, I'm close. I'm so close now. Let's see. Let's give a live update here. 9,959. So really getting close. Tomorrow, I'm thinking. So that's still good. If you don't have Perfmatters and you want to pick it up, use that code, the admin bar, and you can save 20% on that. And if you got questions, need some help, holler at Brian next week, and he will help you out and answer all your support tickets. See, I didn't do it to you again. And I definitely appreciate everybody showing up here. We held about 50 people's attention this whole time, and we're nerding out about Core Web Vitals. I think that's pretty good. Yeah, that is pretty good. 50 people geeking out on a Friday over Core Web Vitals. Y'all are my people. That's all I'm going to say. All right. Well, Brian, I really appreciate this. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time to do this for our community and sharing all this knowledge you have. There are lots of options out there for performance stuff, but you're the only one showing up in Tab and giving us all this great training. So I hope everybody recognizes that.
Well, yeah, thanks for, hopefully it's helpful. And yeah, I thank you for doing these videos, because if I'm not a video person, so, you know, I would never do this on my own type of thing. So it's great that you're doing this type of content, and with the Facebook group too. So,
well, the respect goes both ways. I do appreciate it. So, all right. I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend, and we'll do this again next month. I'll make sure to post all about it when we get close to that date, and we'll see you guys on that one. All right. Bye-bye, y'all.
see ya.